Hey, Bills Mafia. We know there's only one topic every day. All Bills, all the time. And now Matt Beauvais and Sal Capaccio are going really deep, talking Bills all year long, because it's always game day in Buffalo.
I know Matt is a very loving, affectionate Italian dad like me who has to spoil his kids. So I have to ask, do you always feel like you haven't bought enough for birthdays? And do you think that Santa really has to do it up this year for Christmas?
So let me tell you, it's like you're reading my mind without even reading my mind. These are text messages that I sent my wife a little bit ago. Okay, you can read this. I'm stressing out about our child not having Christmas.
Yes, dude, I'm the same way. We're very Italian here. This is what happens, folks.
I literally texted her that probably 3 hours ago.
You had no idea I was going to say that either, which is funny.
No idea you were going to say that. The guilt in my head of not having enough things for her to open on Christmas morning. So
it's going to happen every year, by the way. Just so you know, this is going to be common. My son is 12. It's the exact same conversation in my household. And my wife's like, no, stop. Like, don't you understand? I'm like, no, you don't understand.
It's my wife's response was like, dude, she's 2. Like, she doesn't know if she's opening 5 things or 9 things, whatever the difference is, but needless to say.
Or if it's Christmas.
Or if it's Christmas, but needless to say, I made a call to Santa before the Sean McDermott press conference to request a few more presents.
All right. I love that. Yeah, that's going to happen. What about your wife? You got her all buttoned up for Christmas?
Yeah, I do. Her stuff is already wrapped and under the tree, but we're very low key when it comes to this stuff. Like, we're like kind of low key Christmas people. But yeah, hopefully she enjoys the things that I got her.
Yeah, for sure. I love it. If you're like us, please drop a comment all about it and the horrors of thinking and the anxiety of not thinking your kids have enough Christmas presents. And by the way, we are less than a week basically away from, well, I guess a week away from Christmas Eve. And then it's coming up fast, folks. And the Bills, they will not have a home game before Christmas. Their last home game was a couple of weeks ago. Now they're going to be on the road against the Cleveland Browns. We're going to talk with Spencer German of The Fan, our Odyssey station in Cleveland, in just a little while. But let's get it started with really good news from Sean McDermott, I think, from broad picture and zeroing in. Christian Benford's going to practice today. He said he's moving in the right direction. What I'm really encouraged about is everybody's going to practice other than Jordan Phillips and Matt Prater. We can get to that. Obviously, a notable loss with the kicker. But, man, this is looking a lot better than what we had seen previously.
For sure. And I think that that's a really good sign as you are now approaching the playoffs. And at some point in this podcast, we'll tell you how the Bills can clinch a playoff spot this weekend, because they do need a little bit of help. But Christian Benford, to me, always felt like it was very up in the air. You know, Sal and I have conversations when we even get to the stadium on Sunday morning and just kind of chat about what we know, what we don't know. And it felt like Christian Benford was a little bit of a coin toss on Sunday about maybe he'll play, maybe he won't play. I think they wanted to kind of err on the side of caution. And I feel like they'll keep that same approach with a player like Christian Benford and with a player like Terrell Bernard. But the fact that they're both practicing today makes me think, like, we're going to see him on Sunday. I feel like there's a better chance we see Benford than Bernard. Yeah. But I certainly think, unless there's setbacks, that on this course, they're ready and they're good for this final stretch.
So I'll give you some more context clues. They released MJ Devonshire. Who's MJ Devonshire? They actually signed him to the practice squad a couple weeks ago after the Darius Slay situation where he didn't report. The only other boundary corner they have in the practice squad, 2 of them, I should say, are Dane Jackson and Corey Couch. But Dane Jackson's out of elevations. So really, if Christian Benford didn't play, you have no other choice but to either A, sign Dane Jackson or elevate to Corey Couch. And you already released MJ Devonshire. That tells me they think they're good with their depth this week. And I think that means Christian Benford should be ready to roll.
It does tell you that. It also makes me wonder again about Darius Slay. And I hate to be bringing up something that I know a lot of people have moved on from, but they still do have his rights. And we have not heard an update. And Sean McDermott slams that door closed last week. And it's like, I'm not answering questions about Darius Slay. That's a question for Brandon Beane. But it becomes relevant because look at what happened last week where they had to elevate Dane Jackson. They were a cornerback injury away from throwing Dane Jackson into that game and needing him to play. So it's just something to have on the back burner of like, well, if another injury happens, maybe he wants to come because he'd have a better chance of playing. I don't really know. Or maybe we'll never see him, which is, I think, the more likely outcome, but we shall see.
Okay, so you never want to take a team lightly. You can't do that. The Bills lost to the Dolphins and the Falcons this year. You cannot do that. But is there an argument to be made that you might want to back off on Christian Benford this week, seeing how Trey White played and Max Harrison played, and the fact you're playing Shadur Sanders and not the greatest passing game, it's going to be a colder, harder field in Cleveland. Would there be an argument for that from your perspective?
I feel like there's an argument for that, not because you're taking the Browns lightly, but because their offense isn't necessarily one that has a ton of vertical threats and passing options that you are really concerned about. And honestly, these snaps might be more valuable at this point to Max Harrison than they would be to Christian Benford. So if he's healthy, he should play. But that said, do not rush him back if there's any chance he's unavailable.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the Bills obviously need a little bit more of, make sure they have, I should say, depth at their outside corner. So if they don't have Benford available, they'll have to do something. They are going to have to do something at kicker. We know what that is. That is Michael Badgley. This came out of nowhere on Monday from Sean McDermott. Matt Prater is out this week. We do not know how long-term or short-term this injury is, a quad injury. So here's what's got to happen. They signed Michael Badgley. Michael Badgley was with the Colts earlier this year. He's 10 of 11 on field goals this season. He's on the practice squad. Either he gets elevated by Saturday at 4 p.m., or he gets signed to the active roster because maybe something is more long-term with Matt Prater.
That's a possibility, but I don't think it's one that they will have to take yet, just because I don't think there's much fear of him getting poached by another team. So it feels like he will go on the practice squad. He will be elevated. And we also should know by then if they put Matt Prater on injured reserve, because if they put Matt Prater on injured reserve, that's 4 games. That would be extending into the playoffs if they ultimately get to that point. So I think they'll do practice squad elevations for Badgley. Yeah. And then once they run out of them, then they don't need to worry about it anymore, because then they would be in the postseason if they were still playing games.
All right. Jordan Phillips is out. Matt and I are looking at the Bills depth chart and roster right now. We know Jordan Phillips is out, and Zion Logue is out of elevations. So you could roll, Daquan Jones, Deion Walker, Larry Ogunjobi, TJ Sanders, Veneri Mathis. They should be good at DT still this week.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't think that they'll need to make an immediate move. The only thing that I could see them happening is if they want to get McCole Hardman back, they could do Jordan Phillips to IR and McCole Hardman off of IR. And I know that they just opened his practice window, but in fairness, we watched McCole Hardman in the field house take some punts after practice last week. So it feels like he has kind of eased his way back into this. So I know usually players don't have their window open and returned the week of, but in this instance, with the position he's playing,
I think Max Harrison did,
which was really surprising. And McCole Hardman, when he got injured, I think that this was more of a roster move than it was.
I think TJ Sanders did too.
He did. I think these have been more roster moves because they need to figure out how this 53 works more than necessarily the timeline with the injury. So I bet if McCole Hardman wasn't on IR, he would have probably been playing a week or 2 ago.
And in case you don't know, the Bills did announce that McCole Hardman's 21-day IR to return window has been open, as Matt's talking about that. He's on the practice field. The Bills have 21 days now to activate him, and then they're going to have to make roster decisions on the 53. Here's a question I get a lot from people. What if you release a guy and then you get him back in the practice squad, do his elevations reset? For example, Dane Jackson. For example, Gabe Davis. They do not. You get 3 elevations per team per season, regardless of how many times you're on that roster. However, elevations do reset for the playoffs, which is really big when it comes to a guy like a Dane Jackson.
And a Zion Logue. Honestly, that's the name that I think about, because I do think that they like Zion Logue. And I think that on the defensive line, there is a world where if they get to the playoffs, we see Zion Logue active for a playoff game, because they seem to like what he brings and that he's got a skill set that is a little bit different. So it is an important thing to note. Dane Jackson is really the only other name that I immediately think of as like, and Michael Badgley if they need to, because he would be out at that point. But those are really the only names that I think on the practice squad now have a chance of playing in the postseason.
I agree with that. They will at some point probably have to make a decision what happens once Ed Oliver comes back. But like we just said, they have some depth at defensive tackle. That could be a Jordan Phillips. That could be a Fedarian Mathis. But Ed Oliver, we think, is still on track to probably be able to return in the postseason. There's no confirmation on that, but every indication seems to be that's the case.
I was wondering if we got that today. I was wondering because you would have 3 weeks to figure it out. So I was wondering.
It's a good point. Get him out there and ready. Just let him practice.
That's why I thought coming in today, it was in the back of my head of 3 games left. I wonder if they open the window for Ed Oliver so that he has this time as like a kind of ramp up period. And then maybe we saw him sporadically in the regular season finale, but it wasn't like we were seeing him in the playoffs for the first time. I brought up on our Monday show leading the charge that Daquan Jones had a biceps injury, I believe, in London a couple years ago and came back for the end of the season and never looked himself. So I was like, I don't know what's fair to expect from Ed Oliver coming off of that injury. But the counterpoint was Ed Oliver is much younger than Daquan Jones was at that point in his career. I mean, I think Ed Oliver is 28 years old, and think about how long he has been in the league. So you would like to, I want to make sure everybody is not expecting full 100% Ed Oliver, because that feels like it would be a little silly to be like, okay, he's going to come back and all of a sudden he's going to go out there and he's going to be playing 70% of the snaps or anything like that. I think it would be still very sparingly. And then the more they win, if they win in the playoffs, the more we see him as they get further and further.
You know, you mentioned Daquan Jones, Matt Milano too last year, right? He had the biceps injury. He came back and he kind of slowly, he wasn't himself for the first few games. And then he started to look much more like himself. And unfortunately, excuse me, he actually tweaked his hamstring.
Yeah.
In the Ravens playoff game here before heading over to Kansas City. All right, you brought it up. The Bills can clinch a playoff spot this week.
Yes.
All right. Do you know it off the top of your head? All right.
I do.
Here we go, folks. Listen to Matt Bove.
There are 4 scenarios that the Buffalo Bills can clinch a playoff spot this weekend. They do not control their own destiny. They need some help, but it is not a ridiculous amount of help. The Bills will go to the playoffs if they win and the Indianapolis Colts lose, or if they win and the Houston Texans lose. So if the Bills win and either the Colts or the Texans lose, the Bills will be going to the playoffs. They don't need both of those teams to lose, just one of those teams to lose. They also can get in with a tie if those two teams lose. Okay. So a win or a tie gets you in if the Colts and the Texans lose. That is the only way right now the Bills can get in.
The Bills cannot win the AFC East, of course, this week, but neither can the Patriots.
Yes.
The Patriots cannot win the AFC East really until week 18, as long as the Bills keep winning.
If the Bills keep winning, the Patriots can't win until the final game of the season. But it's a really interesting dilemma, this Bills and this Patriots and Ravens game, because it's really interesting.
Okay.
If you are still thinking about the AFC East, you want the Patriots to lose because it gives you wiggle room about potentially losing to either the Browns or to the Eagles. However, if you are thinking more about avoiding the Ravens in the playoffs, then you might want to root for the Patriots and then just really hope that the Patriots lose to the Dolphins in the final week of the season. The Dolphins, who at that point will likely be led by Quinn Ewers, who is now starting for them because Tua got benched. Okay. So this is can you have your cake and eat it too, or what do you want to see?
All right. I know we have the Browns on tap, and Spencer German's going to join us in a minute. There is an argument here, and people have brought this up. The Bills-Eagles game might not matter really at all to the Bills to win the division. And they could still win the division the week later, depending on New England scenarios. Do you play that game to kind of hold back a little, guys? Like the Bills-Eagles game here on December 28th, knowing you have one more game left at Highmark Stadium a week after that, that game might actually not matter at all for anything in the standings.
So this is once again interesting because you cannot I can't imagine the Bills would be thinking this way. A lot of this also depends on what happens with the Colts and the Texans, because if they win, you are not trying because you still need to get into the playoffs. If you are at all afraid about the AFC North, then it might be better to be the 6th seed than the 5 seed. And it's a weird thing, but if I were the Bills, I would much rather be going on the road to like Jacksonville than be going on the road to Baltimore. And right now, that is how it would set up. The Bills would be going to Jacksonville, and then the Chargers would be going to Pittsburgh. You would rather play Pittsburgh than probably any of the other teams that are going to be in the playoffs.
I was just going to ask you still rather play Pittsburgh than Jacksonville, though, right?
You won't know if Pittsburgh or Baltimore wins until probably the final week of the season. Remember a couple years ago when it was the Bills and the Dolphins flexed into that Sunday Night Football game for the AFC East? I think that's what we're going to see in the final game of the season with the Steelers and the Ravens, because that game has such a notable playoff implication. It's like, even if the Steelers lose their next couple games, but they win that game, they probably win the division. And if the Ravens lose their next couple games, but win that game, they still probably win the division. So there's a lot riding on that game, and that could have a big impact on the Bills.
All right, I'm looking at now. They have the Bills. I had a spot here. There's actually a very good spot that here we go. AFC playoff picture. This is according to a good website I found, playoffstatus.com. The Bills currently have a 46% chance to be the 5 seed.
Yep, I know.
The 4 seed, the Steelers, 81%.
Yeah, I know. So you're playing with the math, but so much of that comes down to because the Steelers' last 3 games are not easy. I'm pretty sure they play the Lions this week, and then after that, they
Ravens.
Ravens. No, Ravens is the
Bengals and Ravens.
Let me look it up real quick.
Yeah, here you go. I got it right here. I'll do that here. We're going to get Spencer German on here in just a moment. Let me see.
Here it is. Okay. So it's at Lions home or at Lions at Browns home against the Ravens. So if let's say they split these games, it still comes down to that last week if the Ravens take care of business. The Ravens, though, they have the Patriots this week and the Packers next week. So if they lose both of those games, then they could potentially be eliminated by we got a lot of time left.
Okay, so I think overall, I agree with everything you're saying about who you'd rather play. I think that you'd still maybe want the Ravens to beat the Patriots, but as long as you also keep rooting for the Steelers.
Yeah, but
because here's why. If the Patriots lose a game, the Bills can still drop a game and be okay at the end. The Patriots don't. The Bills can't drop a game.
Yeah. I'm having a hard time envisioning the Patriots losing at home to Quinn Ewers and the Miami Dolphins in the final week of the season. So that's why.
What if Tyrod comes back at the Jets? They gave him a game in New England on Thursday night.
They did. I'm once again. I mean, you could say the exact same thing about the Bills when they played them 100% later. So it just is kind of like, what is your preference? The only other thing I'll say is maybe you want to be the 5 seed more than the 6 seed, because then there is still a chance that you could be hosting a playoff game. Right. Because if you are the 5 seed and you win your games and there's another upset that happens, you could potentially be hosting either the divisional round or even the AFC Championship if you kept winning.
All right, so let's do this real quick. I think we all agree Houston's the team that it's like the kind of the nightmare matchup. You don't want to do that, especially at Houston, right? Mm-hmm. Look at their schedule. Raiders, Chargers, Colts. I think they're going to win out.
They probably are, but go to the Jags schedule. What is the Jags schedule? So click it right there. So they have Broncos, Colts, Titans.
Who are you rooting for this week between Jags and Broncos? You want the Jags to hold off the Texans, but if there's any outside chance of the Bills getting a 1 seed, which there is mathematically, the Broncos loss would matter.
I think you want the Jags to win because I think you would rather play them than the Texans anyway. So you want them to still be in control of the AFC South.
How good do you think the Broncos are?
Of the teams I would be the most worried to face, I think they're still like 3rd or 4th. If I'm the Bills, I would be more worried about the Patriots, about the Texans, and personally the Ravens, which I know might be a crazy thing to say. But last week, Lamar started to look like Lamar again a little bit. And I would be much more intimidated if I was the Bills going into Baltimore, where in years past they have struggled against Lamar Jackson, than I would be going on the road to Denver.
You know, last year there was a proposal at the NFL owners meetings.
I know, I thought about this.
The Detroit Lions actually, I think, gave the proposal that, you win your division, you're in. But once we get the division winners and then the next best teams by record, we reseed and everybody just goes according to what their record is. Mm-hmm. That failed. There was some momentum from what I remember, but that failed. This is a year where Bills fans could say, hey, you have 2 or 3 more wins than a team and you got to go to their place. That doesn't seem right.
Also, think about all of the years where the Bills stunk and there was only 6 teams that would get into the playoffs. Then the 7th team got added, and then the 2nd overall seed lost the bye. How many times have the Bills been the 2 seed in the playoffs? I think it has been 3 or 4 years during this run where they have been the 2 seed. So that is why you're like, man, the timing really just kind of stunk for the Bills and when they ended up getting good. But yeah, that's just the reality of it. And these are the cards you've been dealt.
All right. Well, we are, I'm told by Spencer, he's going to join us soon. So let's just wrap up a couple things before we get to him. We'll get a couple quick things on the Browns once he comes in, and hopefully we're able to do that. Matt brought it up earlier. Tua Tagovailoa benched by Mike McDaniel and the Miami Dolphins. I say Mike McDaniel. He's the one that announces it. I wonder if it was Stephen Ross actually making that call. I'm not really sure because it feels like Mike McDaniel is kind of coaching for his future. But at the same time, maybe it's let's see what you can do with someone other than Tua to see if I want you as my coach going forward. This is an organization now that is on the hook next year for over $90 million of dead cap if they move on from Tua.
You think they do it? You think they move on from him, or do you think
I don't know how you can go back to him? I mean, what do? You put him on the bench next year? I guess you could do that, but that would make no sense. I think you almost have to bite it and say we're going to have a hard reset.
you could say that, and you could just have a year of essentially suffering, which it feels like they're kind of setting themselves up to do. But then I also wonder, like, they traded Jalen Phillips, but that was a 3rd-round pick. Why the hell did they not trade Jalen Waddle? And why did they not trade? If you're going to really reset, and I know you need to still have pieces, and maybe at that point you weren't ready to do it. It felt like the thing that was hanging them up was a first in 2027 or a first in 2026. Either way, those assets would have been really valuable for a team that's essentially now starting over and looking for a quarterback.
Did you see what they did today? They released Matthew Judon.
Yeah, and I was wondering, like, is Matthew Judon going to end up here in a week? But I think
he'd be a Patriot before a Bill, I think. Even though the Bills have a higher priority, he goes on waivers. I mean, I don't think he's having a great season. I've always liked the guy. It feels like, though, I've read some comments from Dolphins fans like, yeah, he hasn't been that good this year.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. And the problem is some of the Bills pass rushers who are depth passers haven't really been that good this year, so maybe there would be a little added juice there.
I do think he's versatile, like kind of like a Michael Hoyt kind of role, right? I do think so. I wonder. But again, anybody released right now has to go through waivers. Okay. We let him pass through waivers to grab him here on It's Always Game Day in Buffalo. Spencer German joins us from 92.3 The Fan in Cleveland, our Odyssey station. Hi, Spencer. We miss you here in Buffalo.
Hi, Spence.
What's going on, guys? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you, Spence.
Okay.
The last time I think that I was on your radio show, and it might have been one time since then, was when the Bills hired Ken Dorsey. And I remember I just poured a bunch of cold water on Ken Dorsey, and then a couple people were mean. But I'm glad that I was on the right side of that one.
Hey, everything you said on that appearance came to fruition, and we all, I think, saw about midway through the season that this was not going to work. And I agree with you, by the way. I tried to tell people, I don't know about this Ken Dorsey guy, and it didn't obviously work. So, now they have this up-and-coming hot shot offensive coordinator in Tommy Rees, and I think things are going a little bit better with him, but the offense is just very limited in what they can do. So,
what year did you leave Buffalo to go to Cleveland?
So my last year covering the Bills was 2017. So
okay, so you did get one playoff year in.
Yeah,
you got one playoff year in. I was like,
right.
Man, this guy went from the Bills, he leaves, and then he's got to go to the Browns, and the Bills get good. But you did get one playoff year in. But man, in Cleveland, I know there's lots of jokes, and every year it seems like it's the same old factory of sadness, missing the playoffs. I get it. What has really held this organization back more than anything, do you think, from a 30,000-foot view?
Yeah, so what's interesting is, what's funny is I left Buffalo in 2017, get to Cleveland. 2020, Kevin Stefanski comes in, Andrew Berry comes in. That team goes to the playoffs, right? And they're sort of on this resurgence where they drafted a bunch of young guys. They get Myles Garrett, they get Denzel Ward, they get Baker Mayfield. It feels like they finally have this nice foundation. And, they make the playoffs. They win a playoff game for the first time since, they returned in 99 and all that. And there was a lot of positive momentum. And so as you ask the question, what has held this organization back, I think everyone points to one thing, and it's the Deshaun Watson trade in 2022. As soon as they pulled the trigger on that, they gave away 3 years worth of first-round picks. They brought in a quarterback who, for whatever reason, hasn't been able to reclaim the quarterback that he once was. I mean, I think at the time it was understandable why they were interested in a player like that, right? Like one of the best 5 quarterbacks in the league before everything that kind of came to fruition and before he was kind of held out of action for that year that he was still in Houston. But I think a lot of it's a mental block for him, and it just hasn't come to fruition. And so when you do that, you take the chance that if it doesn't work out, you're sort of punting on multiple years of first-round picks and drafting guys and developing, and that's where this roster's at right now. They just have not been able to develop up until this year, where Andrew Berry has a really good draft class right now. They haven't been able to, fill out the roster, supplement the roster behind certain key groups and position groups, and I think that's what's played itself out on the field this year. Some of it's not like Kevin Stefanski's all forgiven either. Like there's been a lot of coaching things that have gone wrong. But I think it's also a coaching staff that's working with sort of bad ingredients, and they're trying to make this recipe, and it's just not working.
You mentioned the draft class, and I think here in Buffalo, there is, of course, a lot of curiosity about Shedeur Sanders, especially because, we're going to see him this weekend. And it feels like it's been a little up and down, but there have actually been some ups in this. Is that the right way of evaluating it from the outside looking in? And what have you made of Shedeur Sanders' kind of first month in the NFL?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a very good way to sort of classify ups and downs. I think this past weekend was certainly a down. He had probably his worst performance as a starter for this team in 4 games against the Bears. Just, they showed him some things, simulated pressure, then drop it into coverages, and he threw some picks because of that. The one pick wasn't his fault. But I think the week before that, you saw the best of Shedeur Sanders against the Tennessee Titans, and you saw some of what he can do. The one thing you did still see in that Bears game that I think has been consistent is his ability to push the ball downfield. And that might be the thing that adds enough intrigue where no matter what happens at the end of the season here, maybe they want to see more of Shedeur Sanders, whether it's this regime, whether it's a new regime, because he has shown some promise in that way. And I actually did think, even dating back to the draft, that Shedeur was a good fit for what Kevin Stefanski wants to do offensively, the accuracy stuff from college that I think he has, and his ability to sort of, operate from the pocket, I think were things that intrigued me. And you've seen massive progress in that area specifically. One of the big knocks on him coming out of college was he drifts in the pocket a lot when there was pressure, and that would lead to these really long sacks. You saw him fix that almost immediately. His first appearance to his first start, he stopped doing that. He was stepping up in the pocket more. There's still some things he has to correct. He holds the ball a little bit too long at times. He's clearly still learning how to diagnose certain things and read certain things that defenses are showing him. But I think the one thing you can never say about Shedeur is that he's not trying to be great. That is on full display every single week. The effort, the amount of time he puts in. He's actually pretty candid with us about what it takes to be great at quarterback and certain nuances of things that he's looking at, that he's trying to work on, whether it's a relationship with a wide receiver or what a defense is showing him. And so I appreciate that about Shedeur for sure. But the big question I think for the Browns is this final 3 games going to be enough to convince them that he legitimately is their future at quarterback, and maybe they don't have to draft a guy, or is it just going to sort of be this? Well, we got to sort of explore other options here.
A few years ago, this includes Wyatt Teller, of course, who you got from Buffalo in a trade over there in Cleveland. We were all told how great this offensive line was, and it was. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah.
They put together a really incredible offensive line. What happened since then? Are they still really good, but it's the quarterback and receivers? Is it no, they have injuries? Is it they made some bad decisions, guys not playing as well? What's the truth there now?
I think it's a little bit of the things that you said. I also just think it's the signs of a group that's aged out a little bit.
Yeah.
Joe Bitonio is still playing at a pretty effective level. I don't know if he's quite as good as he's been in previous years, but he flirted with retirement this offseason. He's probably going to flirt with retirement again this upcoming offseason, especially after potentially another 3-win season. Wyatt Teller, I think, has taken some steps back. He was, we in Cleveland, everyone talked about that trade and how great it had worked out for the Browns that they sort of found this guard of the future in Wyatt Teller. Ethan Posick, I think he had some good years early on, and he sort of faded a little bit this year. And then Jack Conklin, I think it's mostly injuries. He's just never been able to stay healthy. He's missed a handful of games this year, including the last couple weeks. And, every time I tweet during a game, Jack Conklin's left the game with an injury, I get a whole bunch of replies of people who are like, was this tweet scheduled like 2 weeks ago? Because they just anticipate that he's going to get hurt. So I think it's deteriorating of an aging offensive line. It's injuries. It's deteriorated play. I think it's kind of a combination of those things. And it's honestly one of the biggest questions this Browns team faces this offseason is how are they going to build that group, reconfigure that group. I talk about drafting and developing and their inability to do that. That's an area that they have just not been able to find really any young pieces to this point that sort of show them some light at the end of the tunnel for their future. And it's going to be a huge concern for them how they sort of fix and rebuild this thing, especially if Joe Bitonio retires when the season comes to an end.
So one more offensive question before we switch
Sure.
to the defense. For the Bills, I think they're trying to figure out, and fans are trying to figure out, who is going to be the weapon that we need to be the most concerned with on the Browns offense. Now, I know Njoku did not practice today, so I know the status there kind of up in the air. Is it Quinshon Judkins? Is it Jerry Jeudy? Who is the primary weapon for this offense? Who could be a difference maker in this game?
At the beginning of the season, I would have totally said Jerry Jeudy, but he just has not had a good season. He's dropping a lot of passes. Something's just kind of off there, and some of it could be just the interchanging all season long that's kind of thrown him off a little. But I think it's Quinshon would be my answer if the Browns had shown any sort of signs of being able to run the football in recent weeks. But I think because of the offensive line injuries, they just have not been able to run the football. His numbers have dipped from averaging 3.8 yards per carry early on to I think the last like 3 weeks, he's averaging like 2.6 or 5 yards per carry. Wow. And I don't think it's his fault because he's a really talented player, and most of his yardage is coming after contact, but he just hasn't really had the lanes to sort of run. So I think right now with the way the last couple of weeks have gone, I got to say Harold Fannin Jr., the rookie, and they drafted out of Bowling Green. He has been fantastic. He fights through tackles. He makes some big plays for this team, and he kind of has become Shador's safety net, if you will, in the passing game. So I think that's the one I look at. But I also know the Bills have done a pretty good job defensively against tight ends this year.
They have. Yeah, they have. Really only 1 or 2 games where a tight end had some decent numbers. I think maybe Schultz, or if I remember right, but it's been only a couple of games where that's happened. Actually, the Bengals, that's what it was. The Bengals. The Bengals had some nice numbers. That was a tough matchup for them. Okay. We've gone all this way, and we haven't talked about Myles Garrett. He's a superstar. He's amazing. He's 1.5 sacks away from the NFL single-season sack record. He's going to be the story going into the game outside of the final score. Is he just taking it to another level and on an ascension here, even at this stage of his career? What have you seen from him, and how is he doing it considering he's on this team that is so mired in pretty much losing almost every week?
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable, isn't it? Like, as he's gotten older, just gotten better and better. He's teetering. He'll be 30 at the end of the month, but he's putting up the best year of his career, I think, without question. And it's funny, like, the sacks are what stands out to most people. But every time we talk about Myles, Kevin Stefanski, Jim Schwartz, they all find ways to talk about how good he is at also just playing the run, and that his effort is like relentless no matter what the play is. So it's pretty remarkable. I will say, like, as somebody who covers this team, he is so enjoyable to watch week in and week out. Like, you know you're witnessing greatness every single week watching this guy, and then you're reminded when the offense takes the field that it's all just kind of going to waste. And it's unfortunate because he is such a special talent. The season he's putting together, it is kind of the silver lining. Like, Browns fans who are still tuning in and really invested in this team, that's the one thing they have to hang on to is, hey, 3 weeks to go. He's got this sack record. When is he going to break it? What is the number going to be when he's finally said and done with it? He's trying to target 25, which would obviously be massive if he can get there and sort of set a completely new mark for people to chase after. So like it's the one sort of carrot everybody has to still entice them to follow this team right now. And I know he's looking forward to trying to get it against this Bills team this weekend. It's funny. Caleb Williams last week had a quote in his press conference during the week about how he was going to do everything he could not to be the one that he sets the record against. And I'm curious to see what Josh says about that because, it would be quite the highlight if it's Josh Allen, one of the best quarterbacks in football. That's going to get replayed over and over and over again for years to come if Myles Garrett gets it against him. So we'll see if he can get it done this weekend.
You are speaking my language here because my hot take when I walked into the practice facility today was, I'm sure the offensive line would be miserable. I bet Josh is okay if it's against him. Josh has already a legacy and a reputation where it's like he's already going to be talked about for years and years and years. He would just be resurfacing in this other conversation. And it's not, if he doesn't take like a negative
on him, that's right.
It's not like a Brett Favre situation. He's not going to just lie down. But I do think like if it and I also think it's very realistic. Like Myles Garrett will get 1.5 sacks against the Bills this week.
Here's the only way that I think that it might not happen because the Bills will lean on their run game, of course. This is the number 1 pass defense in the league, the Cleveland Browns. Number 2 is the Buffalo Bills, by the way. This is a game where if they don't have to let Myles Garrett impact the game, they won't let Myles Garrett impact the game. You know what I mean, Spence?
Yeah, it's every time somebody brings up the Brett Favre tackle, by the way, I just think of that video of Mark Gastineau.
Yes, me too.
Yes.
So, he was mad,
Brett Favre had no idea what was happening. That video is so funny. But no, I don't think it's going to be a situation like that. I think what's so crazy is just like teams put out the best laid plans to try to stop Myles. They're like, we're going to chip him with a tight end. Some teams are like, we'll chip him with 2 tight ends and have a tackle over there. Like I've seen teams throw like 3 offensive linemen at Myles before, and it just doesn't matter sometimes. Like a couple weeks ago against the 49ers, he pulled out this Euro step like he was playing a basketball game and completely just crossed Trent Williams up. And that's one of the best in the business. Like it was good on good, and sometimes good just wins. There was this quote from back in training camp. One of the Eagles offensive linemen, I can't remember who it was now off the top of my head. He had a quote where he basically said like he had given up a couple sacks to Myles that day. And he basically said like, sometimes I do my job and with Myles, you just still lose. And that's the crazy part about it. It's just like, he's that good. And we know Josh.
Well, let me tell you this. Deion Dawkins has said over the years, he repeated it. I did an event with him a few months ago. and he was asked who's the toughest guy to block, and he has continually always said it's Myles Garrett. And he'll tell you today. He'll tell us when he talks with us this week, tomorrow. It's Myles Garrett. We don't have much time left. I do want to ask you, last thing from me. I'm looking at the numbers on defense, and they are still really good. So how do you attack this defense then? You have Myles Garrett. You have the number 1 pass defense. Even the run defense is like number 3 in the league. So what can the Bills do against the Browns? How can teams attack the Browns?
Yeah, I think one thing that I've noticed in recent weeks is teams that have been able to kind of get to the edge in the run game have had some success. Carson Schwarzenegger's been fantastic, and he can oftentimes chase those guys down. But I think when you get in open space against certain guys coming up and trying to make plays, there's some missed tackles in there. I actually think, too, because of Malik Collins' injury and him not being part of this defensive line anymore, I think that's exposed a little bit the Browns' run game the last couple of weeks, where teams have had more success running up the middle, getting guys kind of trapped and finding holes and lanes to run through. So I think, listen, the Bills have a really good run game with James Cook, and obviously Josh Allen being able to do what he can do. I think those are going to be two very, very challenging players for the Browns to sort of rein in this week. I think it sort of starts there. I have some confidence that as long as Denzel Ward's out there, it'll be a little tougher to throw on this defense, especially with Myles Garrett sort of bearing down on Josh Allen. But I think it's going to start with like Josh's dual threat ability and how they get James Cook involved, and that'll maybe soften some things up for them. But without like a premier receiver, I don't know that I think like the Bills are going to be able to just like pass all up and down the field on this Browns defense this weekend. Yeah.
So then last one for me, Spence, is if the Browns win, what did they do well? Like, why did they win?
If the Browns win this game, I think it's going to take pretty much like, well, I think on one hand, I think it's going to take the Bills maybe sleepwalking into this one and feel like, we think we can beat this team. You know, we just scored 5 touchdowns and 5 straight drives against New England in the second half last week.
Coming off a big high, you go, emotionally, exactly. You're right. Yeah.
Like, I think that probably has to be part of the equation here. But if the Browns are going to sort of play into that as well, I think the defense has to do what it's done a lot of times this year, which is keep this game close, keep it interesting, really limit what the Bills offense is able to do. And then the offense kind of just ekes one out and does enough. They're going to need some special teams plays to help them, which has been hard to come by. One of the wins they have this year was against the Packers, and it was like the one game where special teams did like everything. They blocked a field goal. They made all their kicks. They did some pretty special things. That was like the one time that special teams went their way. So they need a lot to go right. They need Shador to probably have a good game. They need the run game to finally get going, which I know this Bills run defense has been an issue this year. So maybe this is the game they can finally kind of get that happening. But I think it's an uphill climb for them, I think, overall to make that happen. Because like this Bills offense is obviously incredible just with the quarterback you have to account for with Josh. And I think it honestly is going to have to start with them sort of sleepwalking through this one after last week and all that. But I also don't think that's going to happen because I think the Bills know like the division's now within reach, and they're probably not just going to like show up and not put their best foot forward.
Yeah, that's right. And by the way, the Bills are without their kicker, Matt Prater. They signed Michael Badgley, so special teams could be, something to monitor this week. All right, going to be a little colder in Cleveland. I don't think it's going to be frigid, so I've been monitoring the
not too bad
weather for this weekend. I don't think so.
Guys,
right?
No. I was in Chicago this past week where it was 4 degrees. So
that's right.
Anything's better than that. I'll tell
37.
You
that, right?
I did that. We did that a few years ago in Chicago for the game. I remember that was the coldest I'd ever been. Put the ski goggles on. That was a game we couldn't get back to Buffalo because of the snowstorm on Christmas Eve here in Buffalo as well. But it was super cold in Chicago. All right, you good?
Yeah, thank you, Spencer. Very much appreciate you joining us. We'll see you Sunday.
Absolutely, guys. Yeah,
great seeing you, buddy. Great catching up. I'm glad you were able to join us today. We're going to let you go now and go do your work. Thanks, bud.
Awesome.
Thanks,
appreciate you guys. See you Sunday.
All right, you got it. All right, Bills at Browns on Sunday, 1 p.m.
Yep.
Matt's going to have all the coverage for you on WKBW on the TV side. I'll have it for you on the radio side on WGR Sports Radio 550. Want to thank our producer, Mike Robier, for doing a great job as always. Make sure you're downloading and subscribing YouTube on the video side, and of course, Apple, iTunes, Spotify, and make sure you go and get the rest of those Christmas presents.
Yeah, we're going to go and feel guilty and buy more presents. See you guys soon.
Bye.